Really, I just want them to answer three questions. What is the value and benefit of doing this decision, which they've already done? What is the risk or exposure by doing this? And is the risk and exposure worth the value and benefit? You make that decision. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome to one of my favorite times of the week, and I hope it's your favorite time. You're with Dr. E is in the house, and it is Life of a CISO time, where we got one goal, one objective, and you know what it is, just scream it out. Who cares if people are looking at you? To build world-class CISOs. We're not about average. We're not about good enough. We want to go to the next level. It's all about being the best, world-class. Now, I had somebody ping me on one of my live chats, and they're like, but Eric, how can everybody be world-class? I'm like, well, what do you mean? They're like, isn't there only one? No, we're not. This is not sports where at the end of the season there's only one champion. Or this isn't like an election where one person wins and one person loses. There's plenty to go around. Cybersecurity is one of the hottest and will continue to be one of the hottest areas. So why can't there be multiple world-class CISOs, right? So this is not we create one, right, and everyone else has to settle for second or third place. We can have many world-class. I'm not going in and saying first place, right? I didn't say gold medalists, right? Because in that case, it tends to imply one. But in world-class, we need a lot of world-class. We need an army of us, right? We're going to have the United. We're like the superpowers, right? Whatever the Avengers or whatever comic book series you like, right? There's going to be a group of us that are basically the superheroes of cyberspace, right? To secure and protect the world. The question is, you in or out, right? Do you want to be part of that group? So what I want to focus on today is a little bit what I call sort of back to the past, right? And no DeLorean required, right? And now you can see how old you are not. How many people get the joke or not, right? I remember I was giving a talk at a high school recently, and I made that joke, and they're all like, what do you mean by DeLorean? And I'm like, Robert J. Fox. They're like, who's that? I'm like, Back to the Future. They're like, what's that? I'm like, really? You haven't seen Back to the Future? Like, come on, that's sort of a must watch. So any of you, and I know we have a diverse group here, but if any of you haven't seen Back to the Future, definitely. It has nothing to do with cybersecurity, so don't sit there and look for the punchline. It's just an awesome movie, right? So it's one of those classics, and there was a DeLorean in it. Thus the reference, no DeLorean required. Sorry. I'm always told when you have to explain your jokes for people to laugh, they're not funny in the first place, but I still tell them, and I still have fun, and I laugh, which is what matters. So what I mean by sort of back to the past, back to the future, is I want to reset for a moment. Because I've been talking with a lot of folks and a lot of executives, and I feel like that with all this focus on the different threats and ransomware and attack vectors and nation state attacks and all these different buzzwords and new things like zero trust coming out and supply chain, that we've sort of lost focus of what it is that a CISO really does. Or more specifically, we've lost focus on what is cybersecurity. Remember, if your title starts with a C, you're an executive focused on growing, expanding the business from a revenue and profitability standpoint. And as I've said a million times, but I like repeating it if you're new, that applies to everyone. I know I use a commercial business analogy of profitability and revenue, but if you work for the government, if you work for nonprofit or anything like that, it still applies, right? You still have budget, you still have a mission, you still have things that you need to accomplish. So when I say that, just think of it generically, and it will still apply to whatever business area or entity that you work for. But I find that we've sort of lost track of what we're really trying to do. So the C means you're an executive focused on the overall mission, organization, or business. Then what follows is your focus, your tool, your superpower. So if you're a chief OO, operating officer, then operations is your tool. You utilize operations in a way to effectively grow the business. And if you're a CFO, you use finances or money or dollars as your tool. If you're an information security officer, you use cybersecurity as your tool. So you're basically an executive that focuses on utilizing cybersecurity to grow and enable the business to be as successful as possible, which means we need to make sure that we're focused on cybersecurity and using it correctly. So I just want to spend time on this episode of just resetting. You need to, as a CISO, make sure that you reset with the executives what exactly is cybersecurity. And I will tell you, most of them either don't know, was never told, or forgot. And you might go, Eric, how do you know that? Because a large percent of my time in the last several months has been briefing executive boards. And when I brief them, do you know the feedback I get? Eric, your presentation was amazing, but the most valuable part was where you actually defined in English what cybersecurity is. You actually clarified for us what the focus, objectives, and non-technical metrics are, because now we really understand where we need to focus our CISO and the type of questions and information we need to ask them. Now that's great, but they should have been told already. The CISO should have made them aware. And then when I talk to CISOs, I go back to those organizations and I'm like, how come your executives don't know or didn't know what cybersecurity was? They basically had no clue what you're supposed to be doing. And their response is, oh, Eric, that's their fault. That's their problem because I've told them 100 times and they just don't listen. Okay. Teaching moment. World-class CISOs accept 100% responsibility for what happens. I just threw a big one at you. I will be honest with you. There's people that struggle with that. That's probably out of all of the world-class advice and motivational advice that I give, that's the one especially with people that came from technical have the most trouble with. Because in their mind, if they did what they were supposed to, and they went in and told people, and those folks didn't listen, or they didn't hear, it's no longer their responsibility. It's the other person's. They want to blame other people. But to be world-class, you need to accept responsibility. You need to accept responsibility that if you did it correctly, they would know the definition. And if they didn't know the definition, then it's on you. Now, just so we're clear here, I am not blaming you. I am not saying it's your fault. And I'm not saying it's correct or fair. I'm just saying if you want to be world-class, you need to be in control. And the only way you can be in control is if you're 100% responsible for everything that happens in your domain, in your life, in your world, in your business. Like I said, it is like an advanced, mature concept that some people click, some people don't. But if you spend some time with it, you'll make sense. And here's the ultimate piece on it. If you're telling me that you are not 100% responsible for what happens, then you're basically saying that other factors, other things, and other folks can control your success. And basically, if you're not 100% responsible, you're not in control of your success. So your success is left to random acts of kindness that may or may not happen. I don't know about you. I don't want to live in that world, right? Because now I want to be in control. If I work, yes, things will go as planned. So sometimes unfair things will happen. But that doesn't mean that I'm not in control and responsible at the big picture. So just something to think about. Like I said, world-class folks have this trait. In any field, especially executives and especially CISOs, 100% responsible. They own what happens in their world. So if your executives are not aware, that's on you. And let me tell you, what is common knowledge to you is not common knowledge to them. What is obvious and simple to you is not obvious and simple to them. Once again, if they knew what you knew and everything that was obvious to you is obvious to them, they don't need you. You're redundant and you're not required. You have value to add, and you need to recognize just because in your mind you thought you told them, I will tell you right now, I have briefed. It's picking up a lot now because we're coming out of COVID and traveling and meeting up again. I believe I've done 14 in the last 2 months, and every one of them, not one, not two, not three, not four, 14 out of 14, all told me, Eric, we didn't understand what cybersecurity was, and now we have focus and clarity around the topic. So that needs to be your attention. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hit it from a business standpoint. Cybersecurity, the definition, the more technical definition, and if you've listened to older recordings, I'm always adapting and adjusting. So the pure play technical definition of cybersecurity is about understanding, managing, and mitigating risk of your critical data being disclosed, altered, or denied access. That's really those components. So it's about understanding, managing, and mitigating risk of your critical data being disclosed, altered, or denied access. So there's really three pieces. There's a risk component, there's a data component, and there's a CIA component, confidentiality, integrity, availability. Now, what I found as I did this with more and more executives is the first two pieces resonate. Because risk is not just a cybersecurity term, right? Risk is probability for loss. Insurance companies deal with risk. Business owners deal with risk. So risk, while we apply it more specifically to bad things happening to your critical data, your data being disclosed, altered, or denied access, the risk of those happening, risk is a concept they understand. So if you go in and say cybersecurity is about risk, the probability of something happening in the future, they understand that. Critical data or information, business processes, they understand that. They understand systems and business process. You can even say business process if you prefer with the data. But what I was finding is when we started getting into the disclosure, alteration, denial of access, the CIA piece, that's where they were stumbling and that's where they're getting into trouble. And the reason is that's technical. That's basically what you do as a translator. So really the executives need to know the definition of cybersecurity as understanding, managing, and mitigating the risk of your critical data or business processes being negatively impacted. And then you translate to your team that negative impact is going to be confidentiality, integrity, availability. When we say data and business processes, we mean systems, servers, cloud-based environment that contain and control the systems with all the applications and data that reside on it. And when we say risk, we mean the risk of harmful action occurring from a technical perspective because we're missing patches, we have extraneous services, or somebody is running administrative access. So we are going to extrapolate when we talk with the world-class security engineers, the team that works for us, but we need to switch gears and speak business when we talk to the executives. And what I realized is that last part of the definition was technical and not business language and was throwing people off. If you're explaining a concept or giving a definition and there's words or word that somebody doesn't know, it actually impacts the learning process. It actually impacts the learning process. They actually did studies in school that when kids were reading and they would watch the kids, and all of a sudden the kid would get distracted. They would start looking around or yawning or playing on their phone or stop understanding the concepts. It was always triggered by a word they didn't understand, by a word they didn't know the definition to. So just general learning, if you're reading, and I push reading a lot and I push business books, if you want to maximize your learning experience, have a dictionary or an online dictionary, or I love Kindle because you just highlight words and it looks it up for you, is don't ever skip words that you don't know the meaning to. Because if you don't know what the word means and you continue reading, there's a block. Your mind basically says, I don't understand this, so why you keep going? Because as you keep going, it's like, but I don't understand this, but I don't understand. So it creates a blockage for your learning process. Simple. Understand the meaning of that word, boom, and the block is removed. So we need to understand as we communicate, this is also valuable. If I'm communicating with somebody one-on-one is easier than an audience because watching a larger number of people is harder. But when you're doing one-on-one or small settings or briefing executives where there's 8 or 10, I watch, and if all of a sudden I say something and I lose their attention, where all of a sudden you could just see all of them like, they just sort of start looking around or so some of them aren't good poker players and make a face, or they start picking up their phone and texting and stuff. I immediately say, okay, there was something I just said that was something that was common to me that they don't understand, and I have to reset. Because if I don't reset and basically say, hey, it sounds like I might have lost everyone. Let me go back and reframe what I just said, and then they'll re-engage again. They're basically no longer paying attention. So I know I'm throwing a lot at you here. I'm going off on little tangents here, but it all sort of works together on making sure the executives understand the definition. So cybersecurity. Understanding, managing, and mitigating risk of critical data or business processes being negatively impacted. Great. So that is your definition. So how do we communicate with executives? Everything we communicate with executives is based on risk. So what is risk? Threats and vulnerabilities. What are the things that can happen to your business? And what are the vulnerabilities or weaknesses that allow those things to happen? Now, once again, staying at a high level, executive level, being a world-class CISO, if we really break it down, our threats essentially come from 4 or 5 areas depending on the level of granularity. There's threats that somebody can break into a server. There's threats that somebody can break into a client. There's threats that somebody can break in to a supplier. There's threats that somebody can compromise an insider. And if we want to get a little granular, there's threats that somebody can break into a cloud-based server. So if we want to really look at it, there's threats to servers that are on-prem. There's threats to servers that are off-prem but still belong to us. There's threats to servers that belong to somebody else. There's threats to clients, and there's threats to insiders. Now, insider threat is a different challenge. Yes, you can put some technical measures in place, but often it's more of a physical security type problem. And if we want to sort of mush those 3 servers together, really the threats are against our service or our clients. And if we look at the vulnerabilities, once again, you look at most of the attacks out there, server-based attacks are because systems are missing patches and contain critical data in which the encryption key is stored on the server. And clients are compromised because of emails that look legitimate that contain attachments or embedded links. Now just stop for a second. That's a very simplified view of cybersecurity. It's high level. It's strategic. It can be understood by executives. We might want to use a different term, patching, but that's a pretty common term. But let me ask you this real question. Is it wrong? At a very high level, I want you to be honest and critique, and you can either email me. You can always reach me at ecole@secure-anchor.com if you disagree, or join me on a Facebook Live. Right now we're doing Thursday mornings at 9:30 a.m. East Coast. And before you go in and say, oh, it's too early or too late, we did this morning, 17 countries. 17. We had people. It was 2 a.m, 6 a.m. So it's awesome. It's only 30 minutes. You can get some coffee, right? It's good. But you can come and either comment, question, debate with me. I love to hear it. Or you can post comments below. But if you really step back, it is correct at a high level. It doesn't have a lot of detail, but from an executive standpoint, isn't that a really good framework? Isn't that a pretty solid framework where basically our threats are coming from 3 different types of servers, those on-prem, those in the cloud, and those owned by third parties. And the threats are not up-to-date software and sensitive data that's not properly encrypted. And clients can be targeted because of emails that contain attachments or embedded links. That's a pretty nice framework. And now you can then go in and start mapping the different risks against it. So now you have your general categories of threats and vulnerabilities to map up the risk. Once again, super high level. I always get people push back going, but Eric, I'm like, I'm not asking if it's technically depth enough, because I know it's not. What I'm asking though is it inaccurate or missing anything major? And I've asked a lot of people this, and I've never got that it's wrong or that it's missing. I mean, that's really the main threats. Yes, there's some one-offs here and there, but if you look at all the major attacks, from Colonial Pipeline to SolarWinds to all the other attacks we've seen, it fits within that model. It fits within that framework. So world-class CISOs need to be world-class at simplifying technical concepts in ways that non-technical people can understand. And here's the cool part. I just gave you a gift. I just did it, right? So you don't even have to do that. You now can just utilize that general model. Once you have that model, how do you present to execs? Everything you present to execs is in a spreadsheet with 4 columns. What could happen? What is the risk? Likelihood of occurring, cost if it occurs, and cost to fix it. So now that you have that framework of where the threats and the vulnerabilities are, you now can map that basically to a risk matrix that you present to them saying, okay, here are the current risks to our organization. Here's the likelihood of it occurring, the cost if it occurs, and the cost to fix it. Everything world-class CISOs do should fit under that basic framework. Now, yes, you should have answers if they want to go deeper. Sometimes you do have board members that do have some experience, some background in technology, and they might want to go a little deeper. Typically, what I do when I sit on boards, and they love it, is before each board meeting, I basically have a mini board where I have the security team and the IT team, the CISO, the CIO, and the security team give me a 90-minute detailed briefing of the current update of cybersecurity. Then 6 of those slides they pull out and they present to the executive team in 5 to 10 minutes. And now the executive team will look at me and basically say, Eric, did you do your detailed briefing? And I said, yes. And I don't have any major concerns or issues that aren't in those 6 slides. And then as they go through those 5 to 6, usually I like less, but some of my clients push. I know if you listen to you go, but Eric, you said 3 to 5. Yes. But some of my clients, when you put in intros and team and some other stuff, that there's fluff slides. It's really 3 the 4 solid slides, and then I have some fluff. And I will periodically say, okay, and just so everyone knows, this to me is one of the biggest concerns that we should spend some time talking about. Or this is an issue, or that's an issue. So that's how that system works. But when you're at the executive level, you need to keep it pretty much at here's the risk, likelihood of occurrence, cost if it occurs, and cost to fix it. That's really where we're focusing our energy and effort. And then what it all comes down to are the discussions of what is or is not acceptable risk. One of the misnomers that people have about security folks is that our job is to say no. Our job, you're the folks that tell us what we can't do. You're the folks that always say no, 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 no. I always say, as a security officer, as a chief information security officer, as a strategic thought leader in cybersecurity, my job is not to tell you yes or no. My job is to raise awareness so you are fully aware and understand the risks that you are accepting when you make certain decisions. Because who am I to say yes or no? Different companies, different executives have different levels of risk. That's why some are so successful and some aren't, right? Because of how they manage to control risk. So who am I to go in and tell you yes or no in a business that you know much better off than I do? If I'm coming in as a consultant or an advisor or a CISO, I know strategic cybersecurity. They know business. Even if you're inside a company, even if you're a CISO that's been there a year, but your CEO has been there for 10 years, your COO has been there for 14 years, and your CFO has been there for 11 years. Let's be honest. Do you really think you know the business better than them? Do you really think you understand the success of the business more than they do? No. So for you to go in and say yes or no on business decisions is very naive. It's assuming you know more than them, which you don't. Our job is to raise the level of awareness so they know right from wrong. Our job is to raise the level of awareness so they make the right decisions. So you've heard me say this a lot, but based on that data flow, really I just want them to answer 3 questions. What is the value and benefit of doing this decision, which they've already done? What is the risk or exposure by doing this? And is the risk and exposure worth the value and benefit? You make that decision. Now you have all the data. You're fully recognizing that if you move forward with this decision, there is a 90% chance that you could have a $5 million breach at your company. Now I'm going to come full circle as we wrap up. What executives rely on you for is going, Eric, I want to move forward with this decision, but I don't want a 90% chance of 5 million. I want to reduce that risk. And that's where your chart comes in. Saying, oh, by the way, I have that risk, 90% 5 million, but if you spend 300K, we can reduce that to 40%. Do you want to spend that money? Yes, great. So now they're making the decision, we're lowering the risk, and we gave them the cost-benefit analysis for doing it. That's how world-class CISOs interact and connect with the executives. They're basically letting them make decisions, and when the decision is too risky, they're giving them cost-benefit analysis to reduce that risk to more acceptable levels for moving forward. Now, the best option is the executive decide the risk is too much. So that's where the interaction comes in. If they decide the risk is too much, then you don't need to spend any money because they're not going to make the decision. But if they do decide to move forward, you're telling them what the upfront risk is, and then you're basically telling them what the cost is to reduce the risk to incremental levels. Now, I got to be fair. It works. It's solid. But of course, in the real world, implementation is what gets in the way. So it's not as simple. There are going to be complexities, right? You do have to do the analysis. You do have to do the math. to make it all work, but I'm giving you the general framework that I've used over and over and over again to successfully implement security within an organization as a business enabler, and also to allow CISOs to be an effective part of the executive team. So give it a shot, right? Stick with it, do the analysis. And the biggest mistake that most people make is they go, Eric, we're going to tweak what you did and make it a lot more technical. Recipe for disaster. Trust me, if you go back 2 years ago, I was more technical and I've tweaked it back because it wasn't working. So you can either spend 2 years making the same mistakes that I did, or basically learn from me, let me make the mistakes so you can get to world class quicker and faster. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Life of a CISO, and we'll see you next week.